Okay, well, good morning, everybody. And I just wanted to comment about that last presentation. Thank you very much, Carl and Claudia and Richard. And it's really the diversity of visions that really is going to enrich this discussion. And I congratulate you for the courage to take on that very challenging task that you laid out. So we're going to have a slightly different perspective. Our group is formed from two on-the-ground projects that work at different scales. The Tri-National MAP Initiative, represented here by Vera Reyes, who is working at the government of Acre and also at University in Acre. That's a broad scale, and it's looking at the impacts of road development, as well as climate change-induced disasters and extreme events. And then the Contribuição Sempre Verde project, Renato Farias is the director of Instituto Centro da Vida, is at a municipal scale. And then we have two UF programs, the Amazon Conservation Leadership Initiative, which supports a lot of projects like this throughout the Brazilian Amazon, and the Natural Resources Leadership Initiative, which is a Florida-based project that provide a lot of the tools and the approaches to leadership that we're applying in all of these programs here. And so Wendy, Denise, and myself are from UF. And there's a lot of wisdom in this team. I'm sure I won't be able to capture all of it, but it's been really good to work together. Okay, so when we started working together, we asked ourselves, how does our work address the drivers of deforestation and forest degradation? And we asked ourselves and each other. And when we talk about our work, we're talking about investing in leadership, strengthening collaborative networks, and social learning. So how do these things address the drivers of deforestation? So we're going to situate our work in the context of the drivers in these social ecological systems where we're working. So we have factors like technology, markets, climate change, politics, infrastructure that are influencing these decisions. But within these systems, you have these agents who are the actors in the system. And all of these drivers affect the land in these systems through the actions of the agents or the actors in this system of various types. And so our focus is very much on working with the agents. Okay, so our theory of change, and let's see how I pass your test, Carl. Well, first of all, what the civil society organizations are doing is convening and facilitating dialogue networks. Okay, so they're working with these networks and helping to facilitate these processes that are going on. And the immediate impact of what they're doing is they're facilitating processes that enable social learning to occur and that build human and social capital. Human capital is the ability of people to adapt and work, and social capital is the ability of people to work together. And our theory is that this will contribute to adaptive capacity, which is the ability to self-organize, to learn, and to adapt, and that will create more resilient landscapes, that the systems will be more flexible and able to respond to disturbance and to opportunity. Now, we did not leave out the fact that this is what we're working on, the agents, but the agents are in the context of all of these drivers. So this does not guarantee outcomes because we're working with the agents and they're subject and responding to the drivers. But so we're going to see how this plays out in our cases. But first, I'm quickly going to give you a little bit of a theoretical background about change in complex adaptive systems. So complex adaptive systems are self-organized. They have no central command and control. The system behavior is an emergent property of the actions of multiple individual agents who are all responding to their own interests, their own capacities, to the drivers, to the context that they're in. Now, this book by Margaret Wheatley really explores how the implications of this emerging post-Newtonian science of complex adaptive systems influences leadership and management. Okay, so given that change in these systems is nonlinear and unpredictable, then leadership needs to accept uncertainty and have flexibility to influence the management of the systems. So and that's really the concept of general resilience, to prepare for change and opportunity through learning and adaptive capacity. So now we're going to see how our cases play out in terms of this theory of change. Okay, so the first case I'm going to talk about is Costa Iguaçu Sempre Verde in northwestern Mato Grosso. And the project starts by selecting the municipality of Costa Iguaçu. It's a municipality with a large area of forest, frontier arriving, very diverse, representative in the sense that you have an indigenous territory in the center, you have private lands all around, you have in the north, behind my camera picture there, you have a protected area, and you have private lands spread out throughout the municipality. Okay, so ICV started by working with all of these different sectors. They started individually with the sectors, and this is a key aspect of their strategy. So they worked to provide technical assistance, develop pilot projects, strengthen the groups that are working in ranching, logging, the indigenous group, for example, best management practices for reduced impact logging, intensification of ranching, supply chains and management for the territory of the indigenous community with Brazil nut, different supply chains with the family agriculture group, and also working with the municipal government to set up their environmental management program. And then only after a couple of years working with these groups, having pilot projects of management practices and helping the groups to organize, did they start with constructing an integrated vision through a multi-sectoral dialogue. And the way they did that was first they selected a formalized arena where they would work with these groups together, specifically the Municipal Environmental Council. And then they worked to mobilize the actors in that space to provide technical assistance to this process. So they had somebody dedicated for a year to doing this, Carol and our colleagues, and they specifically used the development of a project for the Amazon Fund as a vehicle to do this process. And they did not hire, like many municipalities do, an outside expert to develop a project for you. They went through the painful process of the community, these diverse interest groups together developing the project. And they articulated a vision that was signed by these multiple groups in a public event. They got the project funded. The Municipal Secretary of the Environment was created as a result of this. And an example of how this plays out now in the management of the municipality, and for example, recently a new mayor was elected and he brought in new ideas, out with the old, in with what I'm interested in, oil palm. Well, they brought this discussion to the council, and the council said, no, we're not doing oil palm. We're going to stick with our plan of investing in Brazil nuts. And as a result, the Brazil Nut Association was given an area for a storage and processing facility. The associations were able to formalize their agreements for collection of Brazil nuts on private lands, and the Amazon Fund is going to invest in this supply chain. And this does create a more resilient landscape. For example, the number of private lands that are open to Brazil nut harvesting from communities went up from 40 to 80 in the last harvest. Okay. And so just thinking about this, how this relates to the theory of change and the system becoming more adaptive and resilient. So we have what the theory of change was, what they're investing in increasing social and human capital. So they strengthened the Conselho, they strengthened the production chains, and then you had a driver come in, the change of the mayor. And the system was more adaptive because it was able to reorient the policy from then oil palm to Brazil nut. Brazil nut collectors are getting access to private lands. And similar process is happening when a new public prosecutor arrived in the municipality. Okay. So now I'm going to talk a little bit about the MAP Tri-National Initiative. This is at a larger scale, and it started with some meetings that were facilitated and organized in 1999 and 2000 by regional universities. And they realized that roads were coming through, and it would be a good idea to start organizing people to think about how we can plan for the arrival of the Trans-Pacific Highway. Okay, so this is the process, this is the structure that emerged out of that process. Started back in '99 and 2000. And so roughly the structure, they have roughly annual meetings called Fora, and they have core themes that are the basis for discussion, different round tables or discussion tables at each of these meetings in conservation, economic development, social equity, and public policy. And there are also self-organized working groups that they call mini-maps: education, health, logging, watersheds, wildfires, civil defense, indigenous, etc. This structure has many of the characteristics of a resilient system. It's decentralized, it's modular, there can be small-scale experiments that can then be scaled up. There's diversity in it. But it's not just the structure that led to the result, there was also leadership in this process. So the scientific committee had a key role, and then key individuals like Vera, and also like Foster Brown, who's in a separate session today, but here. You know, these people had a huge influence on this process, so that's agency. And their agency led to nonlinear, unexpected outcomes. Okay. So what has the MAP initiative been doing over these 17 years? Many, many things. It has produced, and Vera has a couple of publications here that she's worked on about watershed planning and characterization of the region and the integration of these three different national departments or states. They've had many workshops, courses, meetings on various subjects. They've done simulation exercises on fires and floods. They've inserted into the schools in different countries, Floresta de los, Bosques de los Niños o Florestas de las Crianças. Okay, they've had a knowledge train that UF has participated in of bringing back research results throughout the region. Formation of an indigenous council, meetings with the Ministerio Público from the three countries. Okay, so think again about our theory of change, direct results of increasing social and human capital. For example, forming a coordination group of civil defense throughout the region, and then ways in which the system became more resilient as a result of that. So now they have an early warning system, and the citizens are taking protective measures prior to the arrival of fire season or floods, that they have an early warning system for that, and more effective response when there are emergencies, including combining forces across the region. And similarly, they've worked with the public ministry is taking action. They've worked with the schools, the revised curriculums, and then that's translating into the children passing on awareness and adaptation measures in their communities, and certainly, or theoretically, in the future, it's going to set the basis for actions in future generations. Okay. So, from those cases, and given that we started with this question, how does our work address the drivers of deforestation and forest degradation? We gave you this theory of change that we're directly investing in social learning, and that's increasing system resilience. Okay, and we can come to tell you that our cases show that capacity building can create enabling conditions, but it does not guarantee change by itself. It requires time, continuity of these processes, and flexibility to adapt over time. And the outcome is preparation for crisis and opportunity. Okay. So basically, the bottom line here is that the agents who have increased capacity are interacting with the drivers. And you're getting unpredictable, but demonstrably positive results in some cases. Okay. Now, when we're thinking about this, we drew several methodological lessons. The results are a direct function of how this work is carried out. So first, creating ownership by being responsive to the actors' demands and expressed needs and concerns, and mobilizing them with specific immediate agendas, like developing a project. And then creating a safe space for exchange and dialogue to identify shared interests, but giving value to diverse knowledge, worldviews, and interests, respecting the specificities of different groups. Indigenous groups have different formats for communication and dialogue. They have different timelines. And using key partners. Both projects identified key roles that could help mobilize participants and legitimize the processes. Universities, providing knowledge, legitimacy, facilitation. Embrapa is a key agency for credibility, as well as a focus on economic alternatives. And in both cases, the public ministry was a key to getting mobilized and influencing the system. So, yes, and so the bottom line here is responding to the dynamic nature, continuity and flexibility, to recognize and adapt to the social, economic, political, and economic conditions. If there's a new opportunity, the project has to respond. Okay. So now just thinking about scaling up or scaling out. So first of all, our projects on the left-hand side here are working at multiple scales. So the Cote d'Iguaçu project started in a municipal scale, working in individual sectors, and then it scaled up to working in multiple sectors and how those sectors interact, so that they're not working in isolation. And then the MAP project is working in a much larger region. Okay. And there's also a lower scale that we haven't talked about today, but it's very important to think about the NGOs who are leading many of these actions becoming learning organizations. And ICV has a very specific strategy for being a learning organization. In fact, the way they structured the Cote d'Iguaçu Sempre Verde project, where they had different teams, but structured ways of teams interacting across sectors. So there were teams working at the individual sectors, but also the teams were learning from each other how to interact across sectors. And we have a grad student here, Carol Jordan, who's going to be looking at learning processes within NGOs throughout the Amazon. So all of these levels are important. But we also think about ways of scaling out across cases and also engaging with larger scale actors, and then thinking about how we can link with other tools and strategies. So those are the future directions we have, and we've already been working, and UF has been engaging with a network of NGOs that have similar projects. ICV has a key role in this RECAM network, but there are other on-the-ground projects that we've been articulating through courses, through study groups, linking study groups at UF with study groups among the staff who are involved in these projects, workshops, seminars, webinars, and having learning across these experiences. And academia has a role to facilitate those processes within that network that's existing. Okay, so this meeting and the RECAM network, we just recently had a seminar that kind of broadened to some other groups like WWF and Instituto Verde, who are both here, but also at this working group to present today. We've been interacting with the MAP project, and there are folks here from WCS at this workshop, Field Museum, TNC, Amazon. There's a lot of potential to continue expanding, and also through the linkage with the wonderful UFTCD alumni. But we also need to think about not just a horizontal linkages between these on-the-ground NGO-led efforts and what the NGOs are doing and working with them, but also linking to larger scale actors who set enabling conditions and who are engaged with the permanent structures of governance in these regions. So thinking about, and we recently had a seminar with the RECAM folks and bringing in people from government agencies at state and federal level, engaging with the public ministry, who we're also lucky enough to have at that workshop and we're having here, and funding agencies. So the final aspect that we can think about, and also I think is facilitated by this workshop, is how can we engage with other tools and strategies. So the meta-analysis that Claudia presented, the participatory action research that we're going to hear now, and also all the more technical and different kinds of tools and strategies that are being addressed in the other groups right now. So I think incorporating new partners, engaging with the larger scale actors, and thinking about new tools and strategies is the way forward for us. Thanks a lot.